Imagine working day and night to serve a woman who despises the very air you breathe, only for her to throw you out into the cold rain, pregnant, helpless and broken. This is the story of a billionaire's wife whose cruelty was boundless, and the shocking twist that turned her mansion upside down. The rain had been falling since dawn, a thin silver mist at first, then sheets of water that lashed against the tall glass windows of the Malik estate. To outsiders, the mansion was a dream sculpted into stone, fountains that never ran dry, marble staircases that curved like rivers, and chandeliers that glowed like constellations. But beneath that golden roof, cruelty brewed like a quiet storm. Laila moved through the echoing halls with practiced grace, balancing a tray of tea on her trembling hands. At 6 months pregnant, her back ached and her legs felt like lead. But she dared not slow down, not with Marah watching. The mistress of the house sat on a velvet chaise by the window, her beauty sharp and untouchable, her eyes cold enough to frost the glass. Late, Marah murmured without looking up from her tablet. Again, "I'm sorry, madam," Laila whispered, lowering her eyes as she set the tray down. The stairs. Excuses. Marah cut her off, brushing invisible dust from her silk robe. "Do you think this house runs on excuses?" Laila's heart thudded. She had heard the stories, how Marah had driven out 3 maids before her, how she'd once slapped a gardener for breaking a vase. But Laila had nowhere else to go. She had come here desperate and heavy with a child, believing this job might be her salvation. Instead, it was a gilded cage, and every word Marah spoke was another bar locking her in. The sound of footsteps announced Malik's arrival. He stepped into the room with the quiet authority of a man who owned everything he touched. Tall, composed, his tailored suit clinging to a body carved by discipline and wealth. "Marah," he said softly, "have the car ready by 8. We're meeting the investors." "Yes, darling," she purred, her voice sugar-coated now. But as soon as he left, the sweetness vanished. Her gaze slid back to Laila like a blade. "Wipe that table again," she said. "It's streaked, and for heaven's sake stop waddling like a cow. You're an eyesore." Laila swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She bent to her knees, wiping wood that was already spotless, praying silently that the baby inside her couldn't feel the shame burning through her chest. Outside, the rain kept falling, a storm building in the skies, and one building quietly in Marah's heart. What no one knew, not Marah, not Malik, not even Laila herself, was that this storm would soon rip through the mansion and tear every secret from its golden walls. The storm outside deepened as evening crawled in, wind howling against the mansion's high walls. Inside, the air was just as heavy. Marah sat at the dining table surrounded by crystal and gold, yet her gaze was fixed on Laila, who served each dish with trembling hands. "Careful," Marah hissed as a spoon clinked too loudly against a plate. "You're clumsy enough without a belly slowing you down." Laila mumbled an apology, cheeks flushed with humiliation. She had endured insults before, but lately Marah's hatred had sharpened into something almost personal, and Laila couldn't understand why. When Laila stepped into the kitchen to fetch the dessert, Marah's friend leaned closer with a knowing smile. "Why keep her?" the woman whispered. "There are dozens of maids in the city." Marah's jaw tightened. "Because I want to see her suffer." Her voice was low, venomous. "She walks around here like some saint, as if her presence means something." Her friend raised a brow. "Are you jealous?" Marah's lips curled into a cold smirk. "Jealous? Hardly. I simply don't trust women who arrive here alone and pregnant." Across the hall, Malik passed by and paused at the sight of Laila, carefully setting down the final dish. For a moment, his expression softened, a look Marah caught like a knife to her chest. Her smile vanished. There it was again, that look, the same one he'd worn the first time he saw the maid. It was the reason Marah's hatred had taken root so quickly. And as the thunder roared above the mansion, Marah's resolve hardened. She would not allow a servant, especially a pregnant one, to become a shadow in her marriage. The storm refused to rest that night. Rain rattled against the windows as Malik returned late from his meeting, loosening his tie as he walked through the grand foyer. The mansion was mostly asleep, except for the faint light in the kitchen, where Laila quietly scrubbed dishes long after her shift was supposed to end. Still working, his deep voice broke the silence. Laila spun around, startled. "Oh, Mr. Malik, I was just finishing up." He stepped closer, his tone softer now. "You should be resting. It's late, and you're carrying more than you should." Something in his words, the gentleness, the concern, made her chest tighten. People rarely spoke to her kindly in this house. She looked down, unsure how to respond. "I don't mind, sir. Keeping busy helps." Malik studied her for a moment longer than he should have. There was something about her, the quiet strength beneath all the humility, the sadness she tried so hard to hide. "If you ever need anything, anything at all," he said, "you can come to me." The words hung in the air, warm and dangerous. Neither of them moved, yet the silence between them seemed to pulse. And then, "Malik." Marah's voice sliced through the moment like ice. She stood at the doorway, in a silk nightgown, her eyes narrowing as they flicked between her husband and the maid. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sweet and venomous all at once. "Just checking on the staff," Malik said smoothly, stepping back. But Marah's gaze lingered on Laila's flushed cheeks, on the way she couldn't meet anyone's eyes. And in that moment, Marah's suspicions became certainty. Something about that girl wasn't as simple as it seemed, and Marah would prove it, no matter the cost. Morning came cold and grey, the rain still whispering against the mansion's vast windows. Laila rose before dawn as always, rubbing her aching back before starting her chores. But the house felt different today. Quieter, heavier, like the calm before a storm. At breakfast, Marah's mood was unsettlingly pleasant. She smiled too much, spoke too sweetly, even complimented Laila's tea. It made the young maid's stomach twist with unease. "Laila," Marah said suddenly, setting her cup down with a soft clink. "I need a few documents from the study upstairs. Malik forgot them before his meeting. Could you fetch them for me?" "Yes, madam," Laila replied, drying her hands and hurrying upstairs. She had barely stepped into the study when she froze. Malik was there, alone. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." "It's all right," he said with a small smile. "I was just leaving." But as he moved past her, his hand brushed hers, a fleeting, innocent contact that neither of them thought much of. Downstairs, Marah was waiting. "So," she said coolly, as Laila handed her the folder minutes later. "How long have you been throwing yourself at my husband?" Laila's breath caught. What? I would never. Don't lie to me," Marah snapped, slamming the folder onto the table. "I see the way you look at him. I see how he looks at you." Tears burned in Laila's eyes. "I'm only here to work, madam. I swear it." But Marah was beyond reason. In her mind, the crime had already been committed. This was no longer about a maid or a job. This was about humiliation, jealousy, and a wound she was determined to make someone else bleed for. And deep in her heart, she had already decided Laila would pay. The mansion no longer felt like a place to live. It felt like a battlefield, and Laila was losing ground with every passing day. Marah's words, once sharp, had turned merciless. Her orders doubled, her insults cut deeper, and every small mistake was punished as if it were treason. "Did I not tell you I wanted the sheets pressed, not folded?" Marah hissed one morning, her voice carrying through the hall. "Are you truly this useless, or do you just enjoy testing my patience?" "I'm sorry, madam." Laila's voice cracked as she clutched the fabric in her trembling hands. "I'll redo them. Redo everything," Marah spat, "and try not to sweat on my floors while you waddle around." The laughter of two house guests echoed behind Marah's heels, laughter that sliced deeper than the insults themselves. Laila swallowed her tears and turned back to her work. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now. Not when the tiny heartbeat inside her was her only reason to keep going. But that night, as she scrubbed the marble stairs on her knees, her body finally betrayed her. A sharp pain ripped through her belly, so sudden and intense that it stole her breath. She gripped the railing, gasping, trying to steady herself. "Get up," Marah's cold voice commanded from the top of the stairs. "I didn't say you could rest. I just need a moment," Laila whispered, the edges of her vision swimming. Marah descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. "You think the world cares if you're tired? You think people like you get to rest?" She crouched low, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "No one forced you to spread your legs, Laila. You made your choices. Now live with them." The words hit harder than the pain. Laila pressed her palm to her belly, whispering silently to the child within. "I'm doing this for you. I'll survive this for you." From the doorway, Malik watched, unseen, unheard, his jaw tightening at the scene before him. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind about the woman he had married, and upstairs the storm gathered again, louder, darker, closer than before. The next morning, the mansion glittered with chandeliers and chatter. Marah was hosting her charity luncheon, a spectacle of wealth and pretense. Women in silk dresses floated through the halls, champagne flutes in hand, laughing about things that didn't matter. And in the middle of it all, Laila, belly-heavy, face-pale, carried trays from the kitchen to the grand hall like a ghost among royalty. "Careful, Laila," Marah called sweetly from across the room. "We wouldn't want you tripping and losing more than your dignity, would we?" The women laughed. Laila's cheeks burned, but she kept walking. She had endured worse. She told herself she was stronger now, that no amount of cruelty could break her. But Marah wasn't finished. "Actually," she said, setting her glass down with a soft clink, "I think our dear Maid has been hiding something from us." The room fell silent. Laila froze mid-step. Marah rose gracefully from her seat, circling Laila like a vulture. "You see, ladies," she continued, voice dripping with venom, "some people think they can waltz into someone else's home, eat their food, wear their uniform, and trap a man into playing father to a child that isn't even his." Layla's heart stopped. "Madam, please. Oh, don't play innocent," Marah snapped. "We all know you're not here to work. You're here because you're desperate, and because you're hoping Malik will pity you." The women whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Layla's rounded belly and Marah's triumphant smile. Tears blurred Layla's vision as she placed the tray down and clasped her hands protectively over her stomach. "Tell them," Marah hissed. "Tell them who the father is. Or shall I? I don't have to explain myself to anyone," Laila whispered, her voice shaking. Marah laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Oh, but you do. In this house, I decide who stays and who goes." At the doorway, Malik had arrived just in time to hear the last sentence, his eyes locked on his wife's face, the mockery in her smile, the humiliation spilling over his employee's cheeks, and for the first time disgust tightened his chest. Laila bowed her head and backed away, shame pressing on her chest like a weight. She could taste salt and metal in her mouth, the bitter flavor of humiliation, and in that moment, something inside her, something small but fierce, began to change. She would not forgive this, not now, not ever. The humiliation should have been enough, but for Marah, it wasn't. In fact, the look on Layla's tear-streaked face at the luncheon had only fueled the fire in her chest. Hatred had become obsession, and obsession was now becoming a plan. That night, she stood by the window of their bedroom, staring out into the dark, rain-soaked gardens. "I want her gone," she whispered. Malik, seated on the edge of the bed, didn't look up from the papers in his hand. "Then fire her," he said simply. Marah turned to him, eyes narrowing. "No, I don't just want her gone. I want her destroyed." Malik finally looked up. The coldness in her tone unsettled him. "She's a maid, Marah. She's pregnant. Show some humanity." "Humanity?" she scoffed, stepping closer. "Do you think she deserves my mercy? That girl walks around this house like she belongs here, and you," she jabbed a manicured finger toward him, "you encourage it with your pity." "Enough," Malik said firmly. "You're imagining things." But Marah had already made up her mind. Later that night, while the rain beat relentlessly against the windows, she summoned 2 of the house guards. "Tomorrow," she whispered to them, "I want her things packed. No notice, no compensation, and when you throw her out, make sure it's during the storm. Let's see how far she waddles before she breaks." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, but Marah's glare left no room for negotiation. Meanwhile, down in the servants' quarters, Laila lay awake on her narrow bed, cradling her belly. Every word Marah had thrown at her replayed in her mind. The insults, the laughter, the accusations, and yet beneath the sorrow, something new stirred in her chest. Resolve. "I will not let my child be born into shame," she whispered into the darkness. "We will survive this, no matter what." But neither she, nor the tiny life inside her, could imagine how far Marah's cruelty was about to go. The sky split open that night. Thunder groaned above the mansion like an angry god, and rain poured down in violent, endless sheets. The wind howled through the gardens, bending trees and rattling the iron gates. Inside, the house was silent, except for the sound of Marah's heels clicking slowly down the servants' hallway. "Laila," she called softly, her tone sugar-sweet and venomous. "A word." Laila stepped out of her small room, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly. "Yes, madam." Marah's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're finished here." The words landed like a blow. "Finished." "Pack your things," Marah said, folding her arms. "You're leaving tonight." "Tonight? But the storm. I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem." Marah's voice turned to ice. "You should have thought of that before you decided to make a spectacle of yourself under my roof." Within minutes, 2 guards appeared, holding a small suitcase with all of Laila's belongings. She hadn't even been given time to gather them herself. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Just until morning. The rain, it's dangerous for the baby." But Marah's gaze remained unmoved. Out, the guards led her through the long, cold hallway toward the front doors. Each step echoed with finality. When the massive doors swung open, the wind slapped her face, and the icy rain soaked through her thin dress instantly. "Madam, please," she cried, turning back one last time. "Please." Marah didn't even look at her. The doors slammed shut. Laila stood in the storm, shivering, clutching her belly as lightning tore across the sky. She stumbled down the driveway barefoot, water swirling around her ankles, her breath coming in sharp, panicked sobs. Every step felt heavier, every gust of wind colder. Yet through the pain, through the betrayal, through the fury and despair, one thought burned in her mind, a promise to the life she carried. "I will not let this be our end." The storm raged deep into the night, but Malik couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at him, a heavy unease he couldn't name. Laila hadn't brought his usual evening tea. He hadn't heard her soft footsteps in the halls. Even the kitchen, always alive with her quiet presence, was empty. "Where's Laila?" he asked the head butler at dawn, his voice sharp. The man hesitated. She was dismissed, sir." "Dismissed?" Malik's eyes narrowed. "By whom?" "Madam Marah," the butler said quietly. "She ordered her out last night." The silence that followed was deafening. Malik's chest tightened as he turned toward his wife, lounging in a silk robe on the balcony, sipping coffee as if nothing had happened. "You threw her out in that storm?" His voice was low, dangerous. Marah didn't even flinch. She was no longer needed. "She's pregnant, Marah," he thundered. "How could you—" "Oh, please," she scoffed. "She's not a child. She'll survive. People like her always do." But Malik wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed his coat and bolted through the doors into the cold, rain-soaked morning. His driver begged him to wait, but he was already in the car, speeding through the empty streets, scanning the sidewalks, the bus stops, the alleys, anywhere she might have gone. Minutes stretched into hours. Panic clawed at his chest. And then, at the edge of a narrow road near the old bridge, he saw a figure huddled under a broken street lamp. It was Laila. Her dress clung to her skin, soaked and muddy. Her lips were pale, her hands trembling as she cradled her belly. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir," her voice was barely a whisper. "You came." Malik's heart cracked. He knelt beside her, wrapping his coat around her shivering body. "I'm so sorry, Laila. I had no idea." None. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Not just from the cold, but from something deeper. The humiliation, the pain, the betrayal, and now the first sign of hope. "Please," she whispered. "My baby. I need help." Malik didn't hesitate. He lifted her gently into his arms and carried her back to the car, rain pounding around them like drums. And as the mansion came back into view, one thing was certain: nothing in that house would ever be the same again. The sun had barely risen when the black car pulled back into the mansion's driveway, its tires screeching against the stone. Marah stood at the top of the staircase, silk robe still wrapped around her, expecting Malik to storm in with apologies for his outburst. Instead, she froze. He wasn't alone. Laila walked beside him, weak but upright, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. A doctor followed close behind, carrying a medical bag. The sight hit Marah like a slap across the face. What is she doing here? Marah hissed, voice dripping with venom. She lives here now, Malik said coldly, his tone unlike anything she had ever heard. And so does my child. For the first time in her life, Marah's words failed her. Your child? Yes, he said, stepping closer until his eyes were level with hers. The baby she's carrying is mine, and you threw them into a storm. The words were knives, slicing through the illusion she'd built. Marah laughed, not from humor but from disbelief. You're joking. You must be. Her child, a maid's child. Malik, think about what you're saying. Think about our name. Our name, he spat. Our name means nothing if it's built on cruelty. Do you know what I saw last night, Marah? I saw the woman who carried my child shivering in the rain because my wife decided she was disposable. Marah's face twisted. She trapped you. That's what women like her do. Enough, Malik roared, and the entire hall went silent. Even the servants peeking from behind doors froze. Stop blaming others for your cruelty. You didn't throw her out because you felt betrayed. You did it because she reminded you that power doesn't make you better than people. For the first time, Marah felt a flicker of fear. Malik's eyes, usually warm and indulgent, were now cold steel. I want you out of this house by nightfall, he said quietly, the calmness more terrifying than the anger. Your lawyers will contact mine. You'll get what the law says you're entitled to. But this, us, is over. Her knees nearly gave out. You'd throw me away for her. No, Malik replied, glancing toward Laila, who sat quietly on the couch, one hand on her belly. I'm walking away for myself, because the man I want to be would never stand beside someone who thinks kindness is weakness. For a long moment, silence filled the grand hall, the silence of a life collapsing. Marah looked around the mansion, the marble floors, the chandeliers, the empire she thought she ruled, and realized none of it had ever truly belonged to her. It was all built on Malik's heart, and now that heart was gone. As she climbed the staircase to pack her things, every step echoed with a truth she'd spent years ignoring. Power means nothing if it leaves you empty. The weeks that followed felt like a season of healing wrapped in silence. The mansion, once echoing with Marah's clipped commands and the emptiness of wealth, now breathed softer. Sunlight pooled gently on the floors. The staff spoke in warmer tones, and in the heart of it all, Laila found herself treated not as a servant, but as someone who mattered. Malik stayed by her side every day. He never once tried to justify what had happened. Instead, he showed his remorse in quieter ways, bringing her warm meals, reading aloud when the nights felt too heavy, and sitting by her bedside as her belly grew rounder and heavier. You don't owe me this, she whispered one night as rain tapped gently against the windows, not the furious storm that had once swallowed her, but a soft, cleansing drizzle. I owe you more than this, he said, voice low. I owe you safety, I owe you peace, and to our child, I owe a world that is kinder than the one I let you walk into. Laila's heart ached at the sincerity in his eyes. Life had taught her to expect betrayal, to never hope too much, but somehow hope had returned, fragile and stubborn, like a flower pushing through cracked stone. Then, one early morning, before the first light had touched the horizon, the cry of labor began. It was long, it was painful. Hours blurred into eternity as doctors and midwives filled the room. Malik's hand never left hers. Breathe, he whispered, over and over, his voice trembling. You're not alone, not anymore. And then, at the edge of dawn, a cry pierced the air, high, fierce and alive, a baby boy. The room stilled as Laila gathered the tiny wriggling miracle against her chest. Tears streamed down her face, unstoppable and warm. Malik's own eyes glistened as he touched the baby's small fingers, fingers that curled instinctively around his. Welcome home, little one, he whispered, voice breaking. You'll never know the cold your mother faced. I promise you that. Laila looked up at him, exhaustion and joy woven into her smile. We made it, she murmured. Yes, Malik said, his voice a whisper of reverence. We did. Outside, the rain stopped completely. The sky, washed clean, opened into a soft golden morning, as if the world itself was blessing this new beginning. Years passed, seasons turned. The mansion, once a monument to pride and cruelty, became something else entirely, a sanctuary of second chances. Children's laughter often echoed through its halls now. Servants were treated like family, and the heavy air of arrogance had long lifted. And at the center of it all was a boy named Amir, Laila's son. He had Malik's eyes, deep and thoughtful, but Laila's spirit, wild, resilient and kind. From the day he could walk, Amir followed his mother through the garden, always asking questions, always eager to understand the world around him. But it was the night of his 5th birthday that sealed the lesson this story was meant to teach. After the guests had left and the house was quiet, Amir climbed onto his father's lap and asked, "Papa," Amir asked softly, "why do people talk about the past like it was something bad?" Malik's hand stilled on the child's hair. Across the room, Laila paused by the window, listening. It was a simple question, but behind it lay years of pain, choices, and change. There were mistakes made in this house. Malik said quietly, "And someone forgot something very important, something every person must remember, no matter how rich or powerful they become." "What's that?" Amir asked, his little brows furrowing. "That kindness," Malik said, his voice low but steady, "is worth more than gold, and that power means nothing if it hurts the people beneath it." Amir thought for a long moment, then nodded solemnly, as if sealing the words inside his heart. "Then I'll be kind," he said, "always." And as Laila stepped closer, her eyes glistening with quiet pride, Malik reached for her hand, the same hand that had once trembled in the rain, now steady and strong. They watched their son chase fireflies in the garden, his laughter rising into the twilight air, and they knew every heartbreak, every betrayal, every storm had led them here. It was no longer a mansion built on fear and status. It was a home built on love, mercy, and the courage to do what was right. And long after the world forgot the scandal that once shook its walls, one truth remained, passed from parent to child like an heirloom. Wealth can build walls, but only kindness builds homes. Power can command obedience, but only love can win loyalty. And in the end, the measure of a life is not what we own, but how gently we hold the hearts of those who depend on us.